Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the second video, I will illustrate how to present a follow-up case. In this video, I will explain to you how to present a follow-up case in the morning round, and I will end my presentation by explaining how to write the daily progress notes for the patient. So now you admitted your patient and he was seen by your team, and now you are rounding with the patient in the morning round. So in that case, you as a resident are supposed to present the patient. In that case, you are not supposed to mention everything you mentioned on the admission day or the on-call day to the consultant, because he already knows about the patient. You just need to mention the background of the patient, because this is just a reminder for the team member and for the consultant about the summary of your case. Because even if all of them know about the patient, if you have many patients in your team, you may forget some details about you, and your team members can forget some details about your patient. So it is always better, after you identify your patient, to mention briefly about what is his story, or as we say, the background. So I will mention that this is our 33-year-old Indian patient who presented with cough and fever for 5 days, and chest X-ray showed right lower zone infiltrate, and he was admitted as a case of community acquired pneumonia on 23 of May. This is the background, like one line presentation. After that, you should mention the 24-hour event, because in the SOAP, in the SOAP you are just presenting how is the patient today, but in the 24-hour event you should mention what happened yesterday, after the duty hours, after you left the hospital, you and your team left the hospital. So you will mention yesterday the patient spiked fever, and the second on-call saw him, and he, for example, escalated the antibiotic, or the patient desaturated, and he was on simple mask, and he was shifted to non-rebreather mask, for example. So this is a 24-hour event. Then you should mention the SOAP. You should present your patient in a SOAP manner, and it is always important to present your patient in a systematic manner. It was not easy for us when we started the residency to learn how to present it systematically, or at least for me, and Dr. Mohsin Idrisi, he's the one who taught us how to present in a systematic and organized manner. So the SOAP is an internationally recognized way of presenting the patient. It starts with subjective, objective, and then assessment, and then the plan or the recommendation. So in the subjective, you will mention how is the patient today. You will mention the patient complaint, or what is the patient expressing about himself. You mention the patient is feeling better, the patient is feeling more shortness of breath, the patient is complaining about headache. This you should mention as a subjective. And after that, you should mention the objectives, which includes vitals, exam, and investigations. And there are things which we always forget when it comes to objective. So of course, all of us, when it comes to the vitals, they will mention the heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature, but you should not forget to mention about the respiratory rate. And always remember that the respiratory rate on the Cerner will not be accurate most of the time, because the nurse will just enter a random number, because nobody will sit in front of the patient and keep counting his respiratory rate, except if he is connected to a monitor. So if your patient is having a respiratory condition, it's better to count the respiratory rate yourself. Then you should mention about the oxygen saturation, how much is his oxygen saturation, and if he is on oxygen, how the oxygen is delivered through like a simple mask, or non-rebreather mask, or non-invasive ventilation, and what is the concentration of oxygen, 10 liters, 4 liters per minute, or what. And then you should mention the stool chart, when was the last time the patient passed his stool, if he has diarrhea, how many times he passed, and intake output chart, especially in cardiac and renal patient, and blood sugar, of course. So these are things which we always forget in the objective, and I always mention them after. For me, I always mention them after the vitals so that I don't forget them. Then I will mention about the assessment and plan. Sorry, this is plan. So in assessment and plan, it will be the same assessment and plan that was mentioned in the admission note and that was presented in my presentation when the patient was initially admitted. If it is a simple case, it will be like one line assessment and then plan or recommendations. And if it is a complicated patient, it will be like it should be presented in problem list manner. So after I presented my patient in the morning round, after the end of the round, I need to write the progress note, the daily progress note for the patient. So for writing the progress note, I will click add, then I will choose internal medicine progress note, then medical team for Dr. X. Then I have also two options. If I have my own template, I will choose free text note, or I can just choose the progress note of the system itself, which is progress note soup. These are auto-populated diagnoses. I will just delete them. So here subjective, as I will just write here is subjective. Here they mention a review of systems, but actually you should not mention the review of systems here. It should be the background, because the background should be always there in every progress note, so that everyone who is reading the progress note will know everything about the patient without having to go back to the admission note to read about the patient story and why was he admitted. Because many times when I review progress note, I found the resident wrote subjective, objective, assessment plan, and nothing about the background or the hospital course. So basically this note, if you read it, you will not get anything about this patient. So your note should be comprehensive note, because it is not only written for you, it is written, other specialties are going through these notes. Also the on-call, second on-call is going back to these notes in case they told him that this patient are sick. So the background should contain the HPI plus the hospital course. So HPI, you should try to summarize the admission note for HPI, history of patient illness. It should be like 3-4 lines to summarize the reason of admission and presenting symptoms. And then it is very important to mention the hospital course in every progress note. You should mention the significant events which happened to the patient during his hospital stay. First, because this will make it easy for you when you are writing discharge summary to just copy and paste your HPI and hospital course, and this will basically be the main stem of the discharge summary. Secondly, that if you are handing over this patient because you will go to other rotation and another resident will take over, you are making his life very difficult if you did not write the hospital course, because some of the resident will just write his admission information in the progress note, and the patient is in the hospital for like 2 weeks, and nobody mentioned what happened during these 2 weeks. I don't want you to write everything which is happening to the patient in the hospital course. For that you can mention the daily assessment plan which you update daily. But for hospital course you will just write, for example, on 22 of May, patient underwent thoracocentesis. Okay, diagnostic thoracocentesis. For example, on on 23 of May he underwent bronchoscopy, which showed that he is having tuberculosis, for example. So this should be mentioned in the hospital course. After that, just mention the vitals, exam, lab results as mentioned before in the admission information note, and diagnostic results, and the assessment and plan, same as what you presented in the morning round. You will just write in the assessment and plan, and it is not there is no significant difference between the assessment and the plan in the admission note and the daily progress note. So by now I think I'm done with my presentation, and I hope it will be beneficial for you in your residency. Thank you.